Hey, my name is Fee. I'm a 3D artist looking to get back into practicing some more 2D skills. I've been slowly working through the How to Draw and How to Render books by Scott Robertson. Here, continuing on to Chapter 3 with rendering geoforms. I took a shot at one of the local light example renderings by Jun An. So this one is from figure 3.51 from the book, in case anyone is curious. I'm also using Photoshop here and trying my best not to use that many layers, which proved to be difficult later on, as you'll see. As always, just like starting out any of my other exercises, I am starting with the sketch. I feel pretty comfortable now with my sketch draftsmanships, and I feel like it's pretty decent so far compared to my rendering. The proportions of these cubes here that I'm drawing is a little off, and I should have probably corrected it a little bit more here on the sketch phase than moving on to the rendering phase. I was kind of excited to just get to painting, but laying down the foundation of the sketch work is something I should have spent a little bit more time on. I did try to correct it slightly once I put that tilted cube inside the vertical cube that I drew, but in the end it still looked a little off to me. I really wanted that cube to be a perfect tilted cube. Alright, here I'm establishing the base of my light source, making sure it sits on the same plane as the cube, and then drawing a straight vertical line up as high as I can for my local light source. This is where I start the shadow construction phase of the drawing, and since this is a local light situation, all of those light rays and shadow direction lines will radiate out to each of the points on the tilted cube here. I find that local light shadow construction is a little bit easier to understand and a little bit more straightforward to draw than sunlight construction, where you have to worry more about the perspective and converging lines. But that, I think, is just my preference. I like to just connect the dots and only worry about drawing a straight line through the 2 points that I've established. So I'm marking down the points of the shadow where those light rays intersect with the shadow direction lines on the ground. That essentially is the same concept as creating the light planes and the triangular shape that will create the shadow. So chapter 2 focuses mainly on shadow construction, and if this is something that you're struggling to understand or keep straight with all of these construction lines, I do feel like working through chapter 2 helped me a lot in this phase of the drawing. Alright, I think this is wrapping up the sketch phase. I'm connecting the lines for the shadow and darkening in some of the line work so I can see where my final drawing will be before I get into the rendering phase. This really isn't necessary, but it helps me at first to see the lines before blocking in the rendering phase. But honestly, you can probably move on to the rendering phase straight as long as you have a solid construction underneath. And you can see here I'm correcting some of those lines for the shadow construction and that shape of the cube. I just didn't like how it was more looking like a rectangular prism than an actual cube. I probably spent too much time correcting that, and that's probably just the perfectionist in me, and I should have just moved on. I think that's the nature of drawing freehand and trying to connect these lines without using a guide or a ruler, but I kind of like just working on my draftsmanships and freehand sketching. Alright, we're starting here on the render phase, and I'm using a brush that has a little texture to it, and I felt like it was getting a little bit too fuzzy for my liking. I really do like to see the hard brush strokes in the painting, so you'll see I'll end up switching it to a hard square brush that has some opacity, pressure sensitivity to it, even though I think the square brush didn't work out too well either. I'm trying to block in the values for the cube here, the shadow and the 1, 2, 3 read. So that one side is the side that is brightest, that is closest to us. And now I'm working on the 2 side, which is a mid gray, and then the shadow side obviously is the one on the bottom. I get a little bit fiddly with the brush size here on the block out phase. I think I should have just kept with a bigger brush size and really just blocked in the values without trying to make the rendering look too great just yet. It's been a while since I got back into digital painting, so you can see I'm struggling here a bit, and I never really properly learned how to digital paint. There you can see I switched to the square brush. I just wasn't like how the textured brush was looking, so I went ahead and switched to that hard square brush just to get a lot more solid colors in there. I think the book teaches the theory of how to render really well, but one thing that I'm noticing while doing this exercise is that it doesn't really teach you the technicality of how to digital paint. I think I probably have to go back and look up some YouTube videos and watch some more tutorials on basic digital painting techniques before I try another rendering from the book. So here, as I start working on the background, I think I'm being a little bit too precious about the marks that I'm making. I probably should have made a new layer and work on the background on a separate layer so I don't have to worry about painting around the cube here. I'm not sure why I was so stuck at painting this all in one layer. I guess my thought process was that I wanted to treat it more like a traditional painting and get the challenge of trying to paint everything all in one layer. But I think what ends up happening is that I end up trying to blend between those values and fix up my edges a little bit too much, and it all just felt a little awkward when I was in the process of painting. I couldn't just execute it really well because my skill level wasn't quite there yet, and I think I just need a little more practice on that. There's a lot of push and pull of values back and forth, and I think I could probably do less of that and more blocking, at least in this stage of the painting. So for local light construction, that plane right beneath the light source will be the brightest. That's why at the base of the light I have a pretty bright value, almost a 0 or a 1 value on the scale, and then as it moves away from the light source it gets pretty dark quickly, so that fall off will drop to black fairly quickly. And this is the one difference that local light has with a direct sunlight situation, is that the angle of the light changes as you move further and further away, so there is a bigger transition in the fall off of the shadow values as you move away from that light source. I think watching this back again for the second time while commentating on my thought process here, I probably should have assigned values to each of the sides for this cube here, just like I did on the first exercise with the halfway to black rule. This would have made my value assignment and painting a little bit easier. I wouldn't have to think too much about what values I'm painting and just worry about the act of blending and putting pixels or paint down on canvas. So I've turned off the line work and the sketch, and this is where I probably spend the bulk of my time, just cleaning up edges and also trying to correct that wonky tilted cube that I drew without much success. I think I probably made it worse by painting it without the sketch lines on there, so it ended up looking like a skewed tilted cube or some sort of globby volume. So here I'm just trying to refine my paints and make the sides look a little bit more even and less like it's sketchy. But you can see I'm struggling here a bit. I'm probably using too small of a brush, and I'm also not trying to zoom in, which again, I think my stubbornness to try to keep it one layer and more of a traditional sense of painting is probably not working for me here. I debated on whether to do this commentary in 2x speed or even fast forward certain areas where I'm not actually commentating and just painting, but I think there's some value in seeing somebody work at a real-time pace. I think especially for a simple still life or setup like this tilted cube, in my mind I can see a lot of artists who are very fluent in digital painting can complete this fairly quickly. However, as a beginner or somebody trying to get back into digital painting, it did take me a lot longer than I imagined. I think seeing a lot of time-lapse videos throughout YouTube, and just while learning and watching tutorials, sometimes I get a false impression on how long things actually should take. So digital painting, or any painting for that matter, takes a lot of time to do, and I think that's important to keep in mind. I think I have expectations for me to work quicker and be better at this than I really am. So I think most of my value structure is there. I'm working on the cast shadow. There is some occlusion shadow in there, which I just painted out. I'm working on a temporary layer now, which helps with my edge blending and keeping certain edges hard, and it just makes digital painting a little bit easier. So I think I know where I went wrong in this practice, and I think on the next one I'll try to correct those mistakes. I think although the sketching part of this exercise was pretty comfy for me, I still have a lot of room for improvement in terms of things I need to practice more of when it comes to the rendering phase. I think sketching more cubes in perspective at different angles like this, or cubes rotated in space, will be helpful to train kind of my eye to see a cube actually be a cube in perspective. And that's kind of where I went wrong with this tilted cubes. I'm so used to drawing cubes just sitting on the surface that once I tilt it on one side, my brain just goes crazy and I don't know what I'm actually doing. And as you can tell with this exercise and how long it's taken, I definitely feel like rendering was not comfortable for me, and my blending and blocking could use a lot more practice and patience here. I think those are the main takeaways for me after doing this exercise. I think I'll definitely try to make a new brush in Photoshop as well, because I wasn't liking that textured brush that I used at the beginning, and the square brush here was also not being as cooperative as I would have liked. I think keeping a simple brush is still in the picture. I would probably adjust the tilt control and the spacing just to make that square brush a little bit more smooth so that it doesn't look so uniform in terms of brush strokes. So looking at the refinement stage of the painting here, and I probably should have called this painting done sooner than I did, but I was just so frustrated with how it's looking. I felt like I knew what I want the painting to look like, but my hands were just not giving me what I wanted. And I think I probably struggled a bit with the tool, in this case Photoshop. Just not spending enough time painting in Photoshop really didn't help me at all. Anyway, I've been doing more and more of these artist commentary series to help kind of give insight into my thought process and just general ways of working, in case any of y'all are learning at this stage as well. I mostly publish quiet, real-time videos, soundtrack to music on this channel, and a lot of times it's just me and my pen during my practice sessions. So if these commentary videos are something that you like and you want to see more of, just let me know, and I'll try to keep it going. Alright, I think this is pretty close to the end, I gave into the layers and went ahead and painted the refinement on separate layers, just to help me a little bit to get the edges feeling like I wanted to, and even toggling back and forth that background, I really didn't see much difference in terms of how much time I put in and the results that I got. So I'm not sure if it was time well spent, but it was definitely a learning process for me. But that's it for me. Thanks for sticking around this far in the video if you're still here, and keep practicing, and I'll catch you on the flip.